Hi guys, you're welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make a simple kaftan dress. And the unique thing about this dress is the neckline. So if this is something you're interested in learning, keep watching and let's get started. To achieve this dress, I made use of 4 yards of Ankara print fabric. And the black fabric is called a crepe fabric. I made use of half yards. I went ahead to use the Ankara print fabric to make cover buttons, which was attached to the center of the facing. And the next material I got is a tassel. So I folded the fabric into two in such a way that the borders are on each other, and this is because it's going to be a long dress. The first step is to roll the starting line, which is also referred to as the shoulder line. From the center of the fold on this side, I marked a neck width of 3.5 inches. For a small size person, you should mark 3 inches. Now I went ahead to mark a neck depth of 1 inch, which will be connected to the neck width, and this neckline is for the back piece of the kaftan dress. And the neckline for the front piece is a V neckline. So for this reason, I placed my tape from the starting line to mark a neck depth of 7 inches, which I connected to the neck width to form a V neck. So I'm making this dress for a close relative. From the center of the fold, I placed a shoulder measurement divided by 2. And after this shoulder point, the next measurement is the sleeve length. My desired sleeve length is 12 inches, and because I'll be attaching a 2 inches band to the sleeve, I subtracted 2 inches from 12 and I had 10 inches. So I added extra half-inch sewing allowance to that 10 inches, which made it 10.5 inches. To get the shoulder slope, I marked 1 inch below the sleeve length and connected this point to the neck width. To get the sleeve opening, I would be using a bust point as a guide. So I would place my tape from the shoulder to mark a bust point measurement, which is 11.5 inches. Now I'll go ahead to reel a straight line across this point. So I connected the shoulder slope to the bust point line, and this new line would be the sleeve opening for the dress. The next line is the full length of the dress. From our shoulder to our desired full length is 62 inches. And since my measuring tape is measured to 60 inches, I'll just go ahead to mark 60 inches first. And then I would add the extra 2 inches and 2 inches again for the sewing allowance on the M, and that would be 64 inches altogether. So now I'll go ahead to rule a straight line across this point. The next step is to mark a body circumference on this kaftan, and since a hip circumference is larger than a bust circumference, I would be working with a hip circumference. On the M line, I would place a hip circumference divided by 4, and I added extra 4 inches allowance for his. Take note that if it was a bust circumference that was larger than the hip, I would have worked with the bust circumference. On the bust point line, I would also place a hip circumference divided by 4 and extra 4-inch allowance for ease to connect the bust point circumference to meet the M circumference in order to form a straight line. Between these 2 points, I would be making a little curve which represents the armhole. Now I added half-inch sewing allowance to the top of the shoulder line before cutting out the front piece. And then I'll go ahead to trim out the neckline for the back piece first. After cutting out the front piece of this dress, I placed it on the main fabric to cut out exactly the same shape, which would be for the back piece of the dress. This is my main fabric and I folded it into two again. Now I'm going to go ahead to place the front piece of the dress directly on the folded fabric to cut out exactly the same shape. Now I kept the back piece aside to trim out the v-neck shape on the front piece. The next step is to make the plain facing which should be attached to the neckline of the front piece. So I'm going to use a waistline as a guide in getting the length of the facing. Our waistline is 17 inches. So I'm going to add extra 2 inches to that, and that would be 19 inches. From this point I marked 19 inches. I placed the measuring tape upward in a slant manner to mark 8 inches. And I connected both points together. Now after the neck width at the top, I marked 3.5 inches. And from this point, I'll keep marking 3.5 inches from the shape of the V neckline. And when I got to the center of the V shape, I stopped marking 3.5 inches. Now I connected all dots together, and then I'll further curve this line inward to meet the tip of the slant line on this side. So this is how simple it is to make the facing. Now to transfer the facing to the main fabric, I would fold my paper stay into two, then place it directly on the facing. So I like to use a paper stay because it's transparent and light, so I can easily see the lines below the interfacing. Now I'll go ahead to trace out. Now I'm going to place the interfacing directly on the plain fabric to cut out exactly the same shape, and then I took it to the ironing board to gum the interfacing on it properly. The next step is to fold the edges of this facing, but you can't just fold it because of this curved part. There are some necessary things you need to do, which is to notch the curved part inward by 1/4 of an inch so that you can easily fold the facing properly. Without notching, you will find it very difficult to fold the facing. So after notching, it became easy for me to fold the curved edges inward. So I've completed the facing for the neckline on the front piece, and the next step is to attach it to the neckline. I place the right side of the facing on the wrong side of the Ankara fabric to stitch the V shape by 1/2 inch, following the direction of the chalk. After stitching, I notched the seams on the neckline. Then I flipped the facing to the right side of the Ankara fabric. I took this front piece to the ironing board to iron the facing properly. And then I took the front piece to my sewing machine to stitch the edges of the facing following the direction of my finger. After I was done with the neckline facing for the front piece, the next thing I did was to cut out the facing for the back piece. And what I did was to fold this little piece into two, and then I placed the neckline of the back piece directly on it to cut out exactly the same neckline. So I'm going to fold the edges of the facing inward by 1/2 inch and then stitch directly on it. And after stitching, I would place the right side of the facing on the right side of the fabric to stitch the neckline by 1/2 inch following the direction of my finger. After stitching the facing, I flipped the facing to the wrong side of the Ankara fabric. Now I'm going to place the back piece directly on the front piece to stitch the shoulders together by 1/2 inch. After stitching the shoulders together, I inserted the hemming gum below the facing on the back piece, and then I used my pressing iron to iron the facing properly. so that the hemming gum sticks. Now on the center of the facing, I attached my business tag as well as the size tag for this dress. So this is the band I'll be attaching to the sleeve opening. The length of the band is 5 inches, and I folded the band into two to attach it to the sleeve opening by ½ inch, making sure that the width of the band is as wide as the sleeve opening. And I duplicated the band to attach the second band on this other side of the sleeve opening. To mark the point to which the side pocket to be attached, I placed the measuring tape from the shoulder. Since our waistline is 17 inches, I added extra 1 inch, which made it 18 inches. Now on this 18 inches point, I would notch it on this side. I folded these pieces into four, and then I inserted my hand into the pocket to spread out my fingers. Then I used a chalk to trace out how wide I want the pocket to be. Now I'll go ahead to trim this out following the direction of the chalk. So it's time to attach the pocket. Now I would place the right side of the pocket on the right side of the fabric, particularly on the points I notched to stitch by ½ inch. And I would also stitch the second pocket from this point by ½ inch as well. Now on the front piece, I would place the third pocket on those points I notched to stitch by ½ inch, and I would also stitch the fourth pocket by ½ inch. Now I'll take the dress to the sewing machine to stitch the sides following the direction of my chalk by 1 inch until I get to the hem, and I would also stitch the other side by 1 inch so I get to the hem. So if you wouldn't be attaching a cover button or a tassel, the final stage is just to secure the hem of the dress by folding it in. To mark the point to which the cover buttons would be tacked to, I would place my measuring tape from the neck depth vertically downwards to the end of the facing. Here I have it to be 12.6 inches. Now I'll divide the 12.6 inches by the numbers of cover button I want to work with. So I want to work with 6 cover buttons. So 12.6 inches divided by 6 would give me 2.1. So from the neck depth, I'll be marking a distance of 2.1 inches until I get to the end of the facing. Now I'll go ahead to tack the cover buttons directly on the points I chalked. So this is how I tacked the other buttons. So this is my tassel, and I would wrap the extension cord on the last button. So just make sure you wrap it till it's very tight. I wrapped mine twice, but for the previous dress I made, I wrapped it 4 times because the extension cord was wider than this one I'm using now. So I used my needle and thread to tack the suspension cord tightly so it doesn't lose. Alright guys, thanks for watching to the very end. I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe, share and like my tutorials, and also put on your notification bell to be notified when I upload new tutorials. Thanks for watching.